Thank you very much for joining us today. My name's Andy Brown. I'm the product director here at Kocho, and it's my job here at Kocho to look after all of our go-to-market strategy. Delighted I'm also joined by Matt Atkinson, who's going to be detailing the majority of this presentation. But I thought I'd just set the scene just to start things off and take you through some of my experiences. So in summary, one of the reasons you'll be on this call, I'm sure, is that managing carriers when it comes to the mobile airtime piece, it can be pretty hard. So if in my experience, and I have quite a lot of experience of this. So in a former life, I was the other side of the table. I was the global head of mobile for HSBC Bank, and I was looking after a number of airtime contracts all over the world, but in particular, the Vodafone one in the UK was particularly fun to deal with. So a lot of experience of dealing with it, and a lot of insights that I've seen where actually it's not unique to large accounts, small accounts. A lot of people have the same problems. And a lot of that I would summarize as very often when it comes to trying to manage your airtime spend, you're either flying blind a lot of the time, or worse, a little trick carriers love to do is actually give you lots and lots of information, but not necessarily the stuff that's particularly relevant. And one of their favorite things that they like to share is the top 10 lists. You know, focus on the outliers. Who are the people who are using the most data, or who are the people that are racking up the most text messages, or whatever it may be. And those outliers are interesting, and indeed they're sometimes even newsworthy. This is obviously a news story just from last week, where users, I think, have built up the idea that unlimited data has started to exist in their lives. And in the corporate world, that quite often isn't the case still, for very good reasons, but it can still result in the kind of the roaming bill shock, and can be career defining. And whilst this is interesting and indeed newsworthy, it's not actually the main way to manage an airtime contract and keep costs under control. To do that, you really do have to focus on all of it, because the devil is in the detail with these things. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Matt and take you through things in a bit more detail, and really show how we potentially can help people.
Great, thanks, Andy. So yeah, picking up on Andy's point there, that ultimately it's a game of deciding how much time and effort you want to spend looking at your mobile data to truly understand what's going on, versus just looking at the superficial side of it. So what we're going to cover today on this presentation, we're going to be about half an hour and then some questions after. So please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll cover them. So First, going to look at how employees are really using their corporate smartphones. And from our perspective, there's been some pretty significant changes in the last few years. And we're going to talk about how those changes compare to the mobile market in general, because the way we use our personal phones, our consumer phones, is not the same way that we use our corporate phones. You may think it is, and for you, it may be the same thing, but for many people, it is not. So we're going to talk about that in some more detail, and why understanding these changing corporate usage profiles over the last few years is absolutely critical to mobile management and saving money. And really, it's a case of, the tale of two cities here. Those that really understand what's going on underneath the bonnet are those that are going to make some dramatic savings in the next few years on mobile and deliver the right technology to their people. Those that don't and continue to look at mobile in the same way they always have done are the ones that inadvertently overspend. And the thing is, they probably won't realize they're overspending. They're going to think that they've had a good deal, but they possibly won't. And one of the things that we're going to look at here is why just relying on procurement activities to save money is a surefire way to kind of avoid or miss these savings opportunities. And so we're going to talk about a more strategic approach to managing mobile, and why contract negotiations, although very important, are one stage of that process. They're not the primary thing you should be looking at. There's something that come along the line, whereas most organizations, and I think if you look internally, you'll probably find a similar true for your own, there's this big focus on getting the new mobile phone contract, and that's what's going to deliver the savings. And for those people, they tend to give back the savings often over time. So we're going to look at a different approach here today. And then finally, we'll talk about how Kocho addresses this challenge for our customers. So some mobile background. This is kind of the mobile market in general here. So don't read this as corporate, as general. So staggering 95% of all 16 to 54-year-olds now have a personal smartphone. And that includes the people that are working in your business that you've given a corporate phone to. So if you start to look around carefully, what you'll see is a lot of people walking around with 2 mobile phones. And if you are, you should start to really think about, are we getting the best value from that device investment, from that mobile investment? And have we really taken the time to truly understand how people use those phones today? And are we really putting the right technology in their hands? An interesting group of users didn't really care much for smartphones pre-COVID, have absolutely adopted them since. And this is driven by a lot of different things, the need to communicate during COVID, but also things like banking. You can imagine now that if you don't have a smartphone, managing banking is almost impossible for you. And there's a whole group of society now that are being left out. But what you can see is the vast majority of even the 55, 64-year-old generation, they've gone from 50% ownership of smartphones in 2019 to 86% ownership in 2023. Unsurprisingly, during this time, we've seen data usage treble in the last 3 to 4 years. So 300 million gigabytes, whatever that really means. It's an awful lot of data, but let's translate that into something more meaningful. That's 8 gig of data per month per user. So typical corporate average usage, about 2 to 3 gigabytes worth of data per month per user is what we see at the moment. So consumers obviously consuming a larger amount than that because there's probably more social media in there, more video, YouTube, that type of thing. But there's still a lot of that within corporate. But it's increasing quite dramatically. And back on Andy's point earlier, a lot of people are kind of getting used to this. I can really use as much data as I want, and they take that same approach into corporate sometimes. Voice minutes in general, really surprisingly, are pretty much unchanged between 2019 and 2023. So this is using your voice minutes plan and making actual phone calls on them. Now, I thought this would be down substantially, and it's what we see within corporate. It's down enormously in corporate. But in general, it's up. And this is because there's a whole group of people that are making a very, very large amount of minutes and a whole group of people that are making a very small amount of minutes. Conversely, SMS usage has absolutely fallen off a cliff. In 2012, there were 150 billion SMS messages sent in the UK, and that's dropped to 30 billion in 2022. So 10 years later, an 80% fall. At the same time, there were 100 billion app-based messages. So this is Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. 100 billion messages in 2012. That increased to over 13 times, 1.3 trillion messages in 2022. So you can see that messaging has all moved to an app-based environment now. So in general, what can we surmise from this? Well, mobile usage in general is increasing. Adoption of mobile phones is increasing across all groups of users and all ages. So let's have a look and see what might be happening within the corporate world. Well, first and foremost, one of the things that most organizations don't truly appreciate is how much money they're spending on devices versus airtime. Now, that can be complicated if you've bought a mobile airtime that includes a tech fund. But even if you have, you should understand how much is being spent. So when I go and speak to a lot of corporates, one of the questions I ask them is how much money are you spending on mobile? And I would say a good 8-9 times out of 10, the response to that question is the answer is how much am I spending on my mobile network bill per month? But mobile network charges, typically, if you strip out the impact of tech funds or you don't have a tech fund, represent really only about 1/3 of your mobile costs. The vast majority is now going on devices and then with a small amount on support on top of that. So about 1/3 airtime, 2/3. Yet for nearly every single organization you go and talk to, if you talk about mobile management of costs, the focus is entirely on airtime. Now, I'm not saying airtime management isn't important, it clearly is, but if you don't also understand what you're spending on devices. So one of the questions I would have for you today to just think about is, do you know how much your mobile airtime bill is each month with Vodafone, O2, EE, for instance? And then hand on heart, ask yourself in the same breath, how much did we spend on mobile devices last year? How many mobile devices did we buy? And I suspect that in most instances, you'll find that you know roughly the airtime cost, and most do, but someone's got to go away and do a whole load of analysis to get anywhere close to the device number, even though it represents 2/3 of the spend. If we drill down into some of the data on corporate usage, what we also find is that 10 to 15% of all smartphone users don't actually use their mobile phone anymore at all. Now, in some instances, this is poor inventory management. These users have left the business and we don't have ongoing processes to challenge that, or we haven't joined up our Intune estate, which we'll talk about later on, and our inventory with our mobile network estate. So as people are decommissioned on one side, their connection still continues. But actually, a lot of these people are actually active users. And what we find within there is that they're doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So one of the most common ones I see is that an organization might give a brand new iPhone 13 to a user that's joined a business with a SIM card. So we're talking about probably a £1,000 investment over 2 years, including a device, support and airtime. And the first thing that user's done is call forward that mobile phone number to their personal mobile phone, and they put that phone in a drawer, in a bag, wherever it may go. If you don't talk to your users when they join the business and understand their preferences or how you could, for instance, bring your own device, you're going to have a lot of these users, and it just repeats itself time and time again when we look at the data. 10 to 15% of users not using those phones. At the other end of the scale, what we find is the top 1-2% of users commonly account for 30 to 50% of all excess data charges. So these could be things like UK data, or it could be roaming charges. So all these out of bundle charges, and quite commonly the top 1% represent anything up to 30% of all data consumption. Now, why is this important? It's important because if you buy shared data and you assume that everyone's going to use 2 gig of data or 3 gig of data, that's quite expensive data. It's very effective if some use a little bit more, some use a little bit less. It is the right approach, but it's not the right approach to treat everyone, because what we find is in that top 1%, a big group of those users are not using these phones for business purposes. They're using it because they were waiting for their broadband provider to put a broadband connection in that never came, or they never put one in and they don't have broadband at home. So they tether to your 5G mobile phone day and night, because it's very effective to do that. And even more common in houses of multiple occupation, you can find everyone sharing one of these devices. We've seen usage of over 1 terabyte on a single smartphone connection in a month, and it's always driven predominantly by broadband issues. So if you don't look at this on a continuous basis and then challenge it and say, well, do we need it or not? If we do need it, then maybe these users can move to something else, and we'll cover that in a minute. And then I think probably the most important stat that you could look at today around mobile usage is to consider that 40% of your corporate mobile users don't make mobile voice calls anymore in a traditional sense. They don't use that unlimited plan that you buy them for voice minutes. They only use applications now. Now, if people are using applications and they're predominantly using on things like laptop, I should imagine, we're all on a Teams call here today. And I would imagine if you looked at your diary today and asked yourself, how many minutes did I spend on Teams calls versus how many minutes did I spend on my traditional Cisco or Avaya telephone system or my mobile phone? You're going to find that Teams is ruling that conversation every single day. Now, if we don't start to rethink our strategy and we just continue to believe that usage is exactly the same as it was 2019 when we didn't really make any Teams calls or video calls, you're going to be overpaying for services and investing in technology that's simply not needed. So what's driving these numbers? Well, the obvious one clearly is less corporate commuting. People come into work less, they travel less within the UK. So of course there's going to be less use of corporate mobile phones. I think that goes without saying. Teams is now the predominant means of communication for many businesses, and I would go as far as to think, the vast majority now that we're aware of are using Teams, typically though via a laptop or desktop. You might use it on your mobile phone, you might check in occasionally, but in nearly all cases, the laptop or the desktop is going to be a predominant means of communication, and that's going to be via Teams. So as a result of that, even if we look at fixed line communication, Cisco, Call Manager, via platforms, the use of those systems, and even hosted telephony platforms that people put in place, people do not use them. They're used in a contact center environment, but outside of that, they are barely touched. And for many, they are, I'm afraid to say, a poor use of your IT budget now. And so this is impacting on the way that we need to think about investments in communications, not just mobile. How is the use of Teams going to change? Are we going to join our Teams up with telephony in the future? If we are, what impact is that going to have on mobile? The answer is it's going to have quite a big impact. And we need to be thinking, have we moved to the point where we just need a data connection for a user rather than a voice minutes connection? How much impact could that have on our bills? Because I can tell you that in most cases, buying unlimited plans, although the mobile networks kind of force this at the moment, they make it part of the default plan. Even for us as a service provider, we kind of have to buy an unlimited plan. We don't have a choice to buy just 5 minutes worth of calls per user. But this is changing, and I think we're rapidly approaching a point where a data-only solution is the right idea for most. A lot of businesses have, at the same time, deferred mobile device refresh projects since 2020. They're sweating that asset longer. But the interesting thing here is that the consumers, they are using their phones for longer, but they're not deferring that investment for as much time as corporates are. So you're ending up with a situation where a lot of businesses think they're sweating an asset. They think that they're getting good value from that. But really what's happening in the background is their users are moving over to personal devices and they're not coming back. And actually, they just got a wasted asset out in the field. And we can see that within the data. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we go through this presentation. Finally, corporate international travel. Now, looking at this, what we have to reflect on here is that, again, this is your 1-2%. If you've got 1,000 users, it's going to be 10, 20, 30 people regularly traveling, maybe more depending on your industry type, but it's not going to be all 1,000 people traveling continuously for business. Now, what we've seen is that corporate travel's returned to pre-COVID levels already. So whilst, general UK usage has not, corporate travel internationally has. We're at 92% of pre-COVID levels in 2023. And that means we've seen a big return in roaming data costs. We've seen a big return in bill shock from people that are traveling to nice places to go on holiday and incurring lots of data there because they don't understand that it's really expensive to use data in, say, the Maldives. So let's pick on Vodafone today, but I think pretty much it can all be the same. It costs £6,000 per gigabyte of data to use that in the Maldives. If you go on holiday there without a plan. And there really is no option outside of barring that or capping that cost with someone like a Vodafone. It's not included within your daily roaming plan. So £6,000 a gig. So it's not surprising a small amount of usage can incur a very large cost. Now, we now have technologies like eSIM that have come along. Now, to put this in context, you can go to the Maldives and download a data eSIM onto your smartphone that will give you 30 to 50 gig of data for something like $50. So for less than 1% of the cost, we can have somewhere in the region of 30 times as much data. So $50 versus £6,000. It's just ridiculously large differences. But if you're not on top of this, if you don't understand it, if your people don't understand that when they're traveling, there are these big costs, you're going to continue to see bill shock, or you're going to continue to pay within your tariffs and your allowances for this type of very expensive usage. So where are we now? This changing usage of corporate smartphones, I think, has created a massive opportunity for every CIO, every IT leader to really rethink their mobile strategy. We've got new tools in the Intune Microsoft environment that you can leverage, such as mobile application management, which allows us to now secure applications like Teams, like Outlook, and SharePoint in a way that is completely protected from a security point of view, but means we don't have to personally enroll an end user's personal device into our mobile device management software like Intune. Now, this is transformational, and it wasn't really there 4 years ago, but it is absolutely there now. So if you're not using MAM, what you could find is that people don't like BYD because they don't want you managing their personal device. Mobile application management, MAM, removes that challenge, that keeps it secure from your side, and it makes it, there's no privacy invasion for the end user. So this is a key critical enabler, along with technologies like eSIM, which allow us to put a second number on a personal phone, a business number, for instance, or to add data when we go to somewhere that's expensive to roam. But most businesses don't think that way at the moment. Some are starting to make use of MAM. Others are starting to consider the impact of eSIM, but many organizations still purchase mobile, and their procurement teams are in isolation purchasing mobile in exactly the same way they did 4 years ago, and they're missing this opportunity entirely. So let me show you a little example of a typical corporate mobile estate, and this is what we see. I see dozens and dozens of RFPs come across my desk every year, and this is a pretty common example of what I might see within that. So 750 connections, we're using 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 1.5, take 1.3 in this example of average data usage per month, and we use about 20 gigs worth of monthly roaming data outside of Europe. So how does that translate into an RFP? Well, often we'll see something like this. Got 750 connections, we'd like an allowance which is plus or minus a little bit from that. And even if that's not asked for, by the time they've negotiated the deal, then the mobile network comes back. The mobile network is always invariably, if you haven't asked for it, made their commitments based around that 750 number or whichever number of devices you said you had. You'll then ask for 24-month term, possibly 36-month term, either with a tech fund or without. My personal view is that tech funds are one of the surefire ways to lose money. And unfortunately, the way a tech fund works is they take a big loan of money and they add it to your airtime bill. And then every year, because it is CPI plus 3.9%, they add a outsized inflation adjustment to your rental charges, which includes this big tech fund for devices. So your bills just go up and up and up, but you get exactly the same value for your devices that you got at the beginning. So you're almost baking in double the inflation rate at the moment on that expenditure. It ties you to buying mobile devices just from one provider, your mobile network. And it really also bakes in a lot of cost. Whereas if you take a more strategic approach, you might find that maybe you don't need to spend that money on devices. So often we find with tech funds, either people have got too much tech fund that they don't use or too little tech fund and they have to buy devices anyway. So our view is normally SIM only gives you real transparency. And it's very rare to find a tech fund's better value, but it certainly reduces choice. So with or without tech fund, nearly all cases at the moment, unlimited voice minutes, because that's what the mobile networks have made us customized to. And they might say, I want 1.5 terabytes worth of shared data or 2 gig pooled per user per month. And finally, can we have a shared roaming data plan or daily charges? So most organizations, literally, that's what their RFPs really say. Give us some connections, give us a term, give us a tech fund or not, some unlimited minutes and this much data, and give me something to manage my roaming plan for. But if we start to look at the impact there, what we find, because we've really focused on procurement, is that our costs that might be increasing at the moment, we run our negotiation and we get a really good result within a short period of time. So our costs come down because the tariffs have all been optimized, but because we don't do any in-life management, because we don't challenge the way that technology is used or deployed or invested, and because we haven't really focused on the device costs and the value for money on that side, we find that over time, because of these RPI changes and these adjustments and just the wastage that creeps in, our costs kind of slowly creep back up, often to where you started from at the beginning of that exercise, i.e. we've given back all the savings that we had. And then we repeat the exercise again. And I've seen this, I've been in this industry 25, 30 years, and I've seen this repeat every 2-3 years, and most organizations take this approach. So the result, it's not surprising that 4 out of 5 organizations, although they might go to RFP and negotiate, simply re-sign with their existing provider on a lower tariff. And why is that? Because they look at the headline rates and those 5 or 6 things that we talked about, they compare everyone on a spreadsheet, and it's easy to see why the incumbent network can just simply put a lower cost or make the cost at a point where it's just not worth the bother of change. So 4 out of 5 simply re-sign, the savings are booked, and mobile's put away for 2 years. What that does is typically lock in the estate, the existing estate, for a new term. There might be some flexibility, but if you've got things like tech fund, that certainly removes it. Few organizations then challenge that mobile cost again during the term, as long as the bill's broadly the same as it was each month. Probably the most commonly used phrase I hear is yeah, how do you check your bills every month? Well, as long as it's broadly the same as it was last month, then we're pretty fine with that. Again, forgetting that that mobile airtime bill is just 1/3 of your overall mobile expenditure. What we tend to see is savings that are given back through is inflation price increases, wastage, taking too long to remove connections, want people left the business, excess data charges, roaming bill shock. And so what we tend to see is that up to 30% of cost savings that could be tackled or released just remain locked in for that term. So let me share with you how businesses really use their mobile phones. And this should hopefully give us some context then to start to look at how we can take a more strategic approach to managing this. So what I have here is a heat map, and that heat map really basically splits out all of my users. So in this case, I've got 750 smartphone users. I've not included mobile data usage only here, so like mobile broadband. And it splits these 750 users out between how much voice usage. I've got voice and SMS, so no usage, very low usage, mid-tier, and so on. And does exactly the same for data. So no data usage, low data, mid-tier, etc. And then we put the number of users over an average of a 3-month period into each of these blocks. Now, the reason we do this is it really starts to demonstrate what type of user groups, because what we don't have is one typical average user using 2 gig of data using 100 minutes of calls. What we really have is a completely different setup. So in this case, 10 to 15% of our users simply not using those phones or connections at all. And that is consistently, the best practice we're seeing is 4 to 5%. In a worst case scenario, and you tend to see it in public sector more than corporate, we've seen 30, 40% of inactive connections. This next group of users down here are really interesting. These are smartphone users that typically have an unlimited voice plan, they have shared data plan, and they haven't made a single voice call or SMS on their mobile phone for the last 3-month period. And these can commonly be 20% of your users. So what we're really talking about here is users that have moved to an application-based method of communication for everything. They only use apps. Now, for those people, we need to start thinking, well, if you only use an app, could we put an app on your personal phone? Is there a way that we could rethink our kind of approach to BYOD here? Do we really need to buy them a dedicated phone and a dedicated unlimited minutes plan if they're not going to use it? At the other end of the spectrum, we've got 10 users in this case that are using exceptionally high data. So for us, it's kind of 30, 50 gig a month or more. We commonly see these. They only represent a small fraction of the users, but often can be 20, 30, 40% of the data. They're almost always a large proportion of the excess data charges or excess roaming charges. And they always come down to simple things. If it's legitimate business usage, then we can pull these people out of the pool and we can put them on an unlimited plan and probably save ourselves a very large amount on that shared data plan. In most cases, it's not really legitimate, or we're making excuses for it. It's personal usage, and invariably does come down to the fact that someone's broadband doesn't work or is simply not being installed. And if we challenge these users, we can tend to make that problem go away. But because most people just buy shared data, they buy shared data including the usage of these people. And if we look at it, what we might find in some extreme situations is that instead of buying, say, 3 gig of pooled data per user to give you, say, 2 terabytes of data, you might find actually these people are using 500 gig, a terabyte of data, and we could have dropped that down to 2 gig, saving ourselves maybe, £1.50, £2.50 per month per user on all users. So big amounts of saving just by understanding who's using these services and why. This group here, these are people that use a bit of data and they use a very, very small amount of voice minutes. Now, these are your prime target for rethinking bring your own device with this mobile application management, leveraging your investment in Microsoft today and your Microsoft licensing to use this technology. It really is very simple to use. It's being deployed across regulated businesses, all industries, and it works very, very well. And what it does, if you don't know this service already, it allows us to provide the security and the management layer at an application level. So if you take something as simple as Outlook, I can have an Outlook app on my personal phone that will give me access to my corporate account. And I could also put my Hotmail account in there, but it's clever enough to know the difference between the two. We can set complete rules up on that application so that we can't allow data leakage outside of it. I can't send my emails from one account to another. I can't transfer them. And if I need to wipe and get rid of it, I can just provide those rules and those policies at that application level to get rid of that data or to prevent access to it without impeding the user's personal use of their personal device at all or infringing their privacy. So no device enrollment. It truly is a game-changing technology to enable businesses to adopt BYOD. And I'm not saying BYOD for everyone. What I'm saying is for the group of users where they're showing through their data, they don't use much data, they don't use many voice minutes. They're the ones that we should be targeting and asking the question, is there a better way before we renegotiate our mobile phone contract and lock that spend in? And then finally, our fifth group here, this is now the minority in most businesses, people that generally use quite a lot of data, still use their voice minutes, getting good value out that mobile phone that you've paid for them. So if we boil all of this down, what we have is 5 very different user groups, all with different mobile technology needs, all with different mobile network requirements. But for most organizations, we're just treating them all as one. We're buying their voice and data minutes exactly the same way that we were 4 or 5 years ago. We're just asking for a bit more data, maybe a bit more flexibility around the number of connections that we've got. And we're missing this opportunity to really challenge the detail. So strategic mobile cost management is all about a holistic approach. It's what Andy said right at the beginning. It's focusing on all of it. It's understanding what's going on. So we start from the same position, increasing costs, CPI plus 3.9%. I think it's a really bad thing the mobile networks have done there. They're being called out on it now. But last year we saw price increases of 14% on most corporate accounts, just driven by this one clause down here. So what do we do now? Well, instead of diving straight into RFP, we're going to do this detailed audit and analysis. We're going to find out what's wastage, what's being used, how people use those devices. We're going to engage with those users. And we're going to take a 2-stage approach to optimization. Stage 1, let's get rid of the wastage. The people that are using way too much, understand why that is. If we've got people traveling, roaming to places that cost a lot of money, let's give them technologies to bring that cost down. Let's educate our users on what they do. Ask yourself, do you as an organization provide your users with a statement each month that shows them how much they spent on mobile and how much they used? The answer is probably no. Do you as an organization give them visibility of what the policies are or educate them and let them know if they've used too much? Probably not. And so if we don't tell people what they're doing, it's no surprise at all that they don't curb or change their behaviors accordingly. So in this first part, we can remove the obvious wastage. But in the second part, we can then get the strategy right. We can understand, is BYOD for our organization? I think it should always be part of a portfolio, some corporate, some personal device, bring your own devices in that mix. Really get to the point where our people understand what the options are, And we ask new starters, hey, would you like to bring your own device, or would you like a corporate? If you're going to be corporate, we need to understand they're going to use it. And if they're going to be BYD, we're going to assure them that we're not going to have control of their device and privacy. It's going to be a very secure way of managing corporate data, but in a really flexible way for the user. So at that point, we might be able to drive down investment in devices, remove more connections. And then and only then, once we understand what the opportunity to optimize is, and we can factor that into account, and once we understand what our strategy is, should we start to negotiate. Too many organizations I see do none of this first part. They dive straight into the negotiation. So they do get a cost saving, but they're missing the bigger picture. And especially remember that 60 to 70% of your spend is on devices. And most RFPs, they might ask the cost of the device, but they don't focus on the actual true use of those devices. Finally, then the in-life stage. If you've got these costs down by taking a strategic approach, there's no point then not checking your bills or your data usage. If you're looking at data usage once a month, that is not soon enough. You need to be looking at it almost daily, monitoring and managing that usage, or putting automated tools in to make sure that you're not going to have bills drop. Or if you do have people using costs, you're picking up on it quickly. Those that take an in-life approach and manage it continuously can keep these costs down. Unfortunately, for a lot, those that don't can give back those savings. Now, let's just contrast that with the procurement exercise. Yes, we got savings quicker. We brought our costs down by doing a procurement exercise. But then because we walked away, we didn't have the in-life management. We didn't challenge the strategy. We didn't understand what the impact of Teams and Teams telephony is going to be in our business. We didn't understand how we could leverage our Microsoft investment in Intune and mobile application management to release us from investing in devices. We had a big difference. And this is what the strategic opportunity is 20, 30, 40% cost saving opportunity on your overall budget as an organization, if you can really understand what's going on and put a strategy in place instead of just relying on procurement. And don't get me wrong, procurement has got its time and place, and your guys will do a good job for you, but they'll do a much better job if you've done the strategy piece and driven out the wastage first and got a clear position. Then they can negotiate from an optimized position rather than simply locking in spend. So let's recap. Challenge and need for mobile devices and services. Understand your data. Build a completely clean inventory of device connections. If you've got Intune at the moment or another MDM and it's got all your devices and your users in it, and you don't have a corresponding list that joins it up with all your connections from Vodafone, O2 or EE so that you can see it in one place, the chances are you're going to be wasting money and overspending. You need to get a clean inventory and bring all of that together in one holistic view. We need to then take out the wastage and optimize our costs. And then when we've got it optimized, or we know what the optimization plan is going to be, we negotiate taking that into account. So if we know we might lose 200 or 300 connections over next year to BYD, we need to make sure that our procurement team aren't locking in all those connections. So we're negotiating from that optimized position. Then we need to continuously monitor and optimize those costs, those tariffs, that usage, make sure it stays in control. And when things change, we'll make sure our contract was flexible enough to adapt to that. And then finally, one of the big things that we touched upon earlier, but people just simply don't do, is really think about how they can reuse, refurbish, or even recycle and trade in their old devices. For many organizations, we get mobile devices back here that have been sitting in a cupboard for 2 or 3 years. If those organizations have been able to say from the point that the user left, get them back to us, we can refurbish them either for reuse of their kind of modern current standard devices or trade it in, they'd see a lot of money coming back from that device investment. Just think about that for a minute. 70, 60, 70% all of your investment is devices. If you could get 20% of that cost back at the end that you don't today, that would be the equivalent of halving your mobile phone bill. So talk a quick run through before I hand back to Andy, but essentially we have a service that covers this entire strategic approach. It's fully self-funding and we're paid simply based around a share of the savings that we help you to deliver, and we provide a guarantee around that savings. So when we've done our audit, if we can't save you at least £1,000 per month, you can have the results of the audit and not progress or cancel the contract from there. But if you do wish to go with us, we do a no-win, no-fee model where we share simply in the savings that we help you to deliver. 100% of resources to do that. So from the specialist to help you negotiate your mobile phone contract, from the analyst to understand your data, from the tools that we use to do surveys with users, to the in-life management is all included within this service. We have our InView mobile platform. If you haven't seen that, do ask for a demo. This brings together all your device and connection inventory in one place and gives you a whole range of tools and technologies to manage that, keep it under control. But in this service, we also provide the resources to optimize that and do health checks for you. And finally, our service is totally independent. So we act on your behalf, not the mobile network. We're not trying to be your mobile service provider. We're acting in your interest to help you get this optimized and keep it optimized. And this service, the great thing is it can work at any point that you're at the moment. So whether you're in a mobile contract at the moment and you're looking to renew or go to market in the next 3 to 6 months, that's a great time to start. But also if you've already been in contract for 3 to 6 months and you've got another year and a half to go, this whole in-life optimization, this whole challenging of what you've got still makes a massive difference. So it can start at any point of time there. So we think this delivers a better result. For most organizations, we're targeting a guarantee, a saving of at least £1,000 a month or 30%. Now, you may have a very large mobile phone bill. We are seeing, in some instances, tens of thousands of pounds a month's worth of savings within there. But if we don't hit the guarantee we offer you, you can walk away with no charge and keep the results of the audit that we've provided you with. We want to tailor a mobile strategy that really leverages your investment in Microsoft, shows you how you can get most value out of that. You're already doing it in areas like Teams. What we're going to show you is how to do that in mobile as well. Help you remove unused or infrequently used devices and generate further savings and really push this adoption of BYOD where it's relevant. We understand that some businesses it's not right, but for many, it can be part of the solution. Make sure that you've got a fit for purpose and flexible mobile agreement that's going to adapt to change. The biggest problem that people had in 2020 was that they had a mobile contract because they thought their usage profile wouldn't change, and they locked in huge amount of expenditure, devices, roaming spend, and as soon as COVID hit, they weren't released from it by the mobile networks and they wasted huge amounts of money. Make sure your next contract is flexible. We provide the ongoing management to ensure that the savings are not only delivered, but you keep the savings in your pocket. Too many businesses, and look at your own, go back and look at what a mobile spend was just before your last mobile agreement, say a couple of years ago. Look at how it's changed over time. Has it gone back up or did it stay down at those low levels? If it's gone back up, then again, you can see this ongoing management is absolutely essential. And then finally, improve sustainability within your business, reduce your carbon footprint by not only getting rid of devices you didn't need in the first place. That is the biggest cost saving and the biggest, most sustainable thing you can do. But start to recycle, reuse devices and so on. So we think overall a better result. So I'm going to stop there. I think Andy's going to answer any questions that might come up in a Q&A before summarizing on potential next actions.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that, Matt. And I can see the questions are starting to come in, so we'll get cracking. First one is actually quite a good question around, is there a way in Intune to actually monitor data usage for mobile phones, in particular iPhones? And is it also possible to monitor call minutes through Intune?
Yeah, so unfortunately, standard out of the box, these technologies are great for managing your policies and your administration of those devices and the security side of things. You can put certain restrictions in place in terms of controls on when people can use it, but they don't pull back, accurate data consumption. They don't pull back your voice minutes. So you have to kind of combine these two worlds. You've got to combine your Intune world with your mobile network world. And this is what we see at the moment. People look at these things almost in complete isolation. You can have an IT team looking at Intune, looking at devices and users and so on. And then you can have almost like a finance team or a procurement team or facilities management looking at the mobile phone bill, but no one's dragging the two bits together and joining them up. With our service, we do exactly that. We combine both your Intune feed with your mobile network feed to give you this holistic view. And I would strongly recommend you do it, because instantly what that'll do is show you wastage, stuff that's not used, and it's great information. If you can see someone that hasn't checked in, and you can see they're not using a mobile phone bill, well, you pretty much know that device isn't used. So Andy, to answer the question, no, it doesn't give you the data, the cost control that you might really need, but it does give you a starting point to build an accurate inventory.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, totally agree. What's the role of employee behavior when it comes to managing all of this?
Do you know what? I think it's like anything. I'm pretty sure I've got 2 daughters. If I gave them both access to my credit card, I think I'd see very different behaviors between my eldest and my youngest. And the same is true for corporate mobile phones. If you've got 1,000 people out there, they're all using their phones in very different ways. What I would say is this, that if you don't share policies and tell them what good is, they don't know what good is. If you don't actually look at your own bills in any detail every month, you're not going to see the exceptional, the outliers. I think Andy called them earlier on. You don't see them, and also, because we do focus on outliers as an industry so much, you miss the big picture, which is really if 40% of you people don't use it at all, that's your real opportunity. Yes, outliers are important and they get all the headlines, but actually it's the stuff you're not looking at. So yeah, you see lots of different profiles, but in my view, if you don't tell people about policies, if you don't show them their bill every month and what they're using and tell them what's good, what's bad, how can you expect them to change? And that's part of what we do is that whole education process.
Totally agree. Yeah, you've got to have a feedback loop of some sort to change behaviour. eSIMs, they've obviously been around for ages, but there's a question here about, are eSIMs now actually becoming part of what we're seeing out there in the market, or are traditional SIMs still where it's at?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two sides to this. I think eSIM is a great technology to deploy a connection to a device, and for individual users and so on, that can work really well. I'm still not convinced on the argument for eSIM as your standard SIM as in a corporate device. And the reason is, if you change your device, it's very easy for someone to take the old SIM out and put a new SIM in. If you're going to do that, if you go with eSIM, you do have this risk that everyone's got to configure that eSIM capability properly, and it's a little bit fiddly. So I'm a view at the moment, which is put a physical SIM in there for you. If it's a corporate device and a corporate SIM, put a physical SIM in there, just makes life easier. But eSIM is really starting to transform the world of BYOD, and it's starting to transform the world of data usage when roaming. So for BYOD, the model is really simple. Have your own device, have your own personal SIM, and have that as a physical SIM. Probably it might be an eSIM, doesn't matter. You can have multiple eSIMs. And then give the user a corporate eSIM to load onto their phone, and that's almost treat that as their second mobile phone. The great thing is, if they don't want it to ring to their phone, they can just turn it off, and they haven't impacted their core services. So I think voice and SMS eSIM is a really great technology. Be very wary of giving people a BYOD corporate eSIM that's got data, because you can only use one data plan. They've probably got a data plan already, so you might just be wasting your money, or find that they're going to use all your data on their, WhatsApp or content. Roaming's a really interesting one. A lot of plans, Vodafone, O2E, that they're really good when it comes to the core countries, America, Europe roaming and so on. Soon as you step off the beaten track, though, you can find that's where all the problems occur. And eSIM's an amazing solution for that. It doesn't cover everywhere in the world yet, but take an example I used earlier. A bit of plan. No one goes to the Maldives by just turning up at the airport on Friday and going, give me a ticket to the Maldives. They know they're going. With a bit of education, you could get them an eSIM that, as I say, could be $50 for 30 gig. They can use as much as they want while they're abroad. Yet so often we look at bills and we see £5,000, £10,000, £15,000 bill shots because no one educated the user that it was really expensive. So I think they're two good scenarios. The other one is temporary workers, contractors. If you want to give them that, and also with mobile voice recording becoming more relevant for a lot of businesses, giving them that second SIM with a voice recording on it for business purposes is also an interesting angle.
Yeah, very thorough answer. Thank you, Matt. Last couple here that I can see at the moment. I think people are trying to pick your brains now, to be honest, Matt. What are some of the quick wins that you can see for immediate cost reductions?
Yeah, so I'll start with, you've got to get the data, understand the data and the usage profiles, then the quick wins fall out from that. But yes, they are users that don't use their phone at all. They're users that have left the business. Now, this is going to be probably known information. We do a lot of device recycling within the team here. So we're the depot I work in, we process a lot of old corporate devices. About 3 to 5% of phones that we get back from organizations where they may be gifting their old phones for our Solar Labs campaign, or just old phones that have been sitting on the shelf, have a live SIM card in them. Wow. So quick wins, Andy, are join up Intune, join up your mobile, work out who's using their phones, who's not, get rid of the wastage, challenge exceptional costs, look at your strategy, tell people what's good and what's bad, and start to educate them every month on what they're using. And we have tools that, if you just want to do that user statement bit, we've got tools that do that. If you want to look at the wider strategy, obviously we've got this program we're talking about here today.
Excellent, thank you. Right, we've got a very long question. We'll do one more.
Okay, I'll take that.
And then that's fine. But yeah, so this is just come in. Can you talk about any practices you've seen employers adopt when bringing in MAM for BYOD, specifically in regard to ensuring their users are not feeling pressured or constantly contactable by having all their work apps on their personal devices? Obviously, we have been talking about the challenges of BYOD, and the total access to devices is a huge put off. So solving that is great. But as we move to enforceable separation, that's separation of work and personal time. I'll chip in a little bit on that. And then I'll let you add as well, Matt. I think one of the interesting things when you look at the Microsoft application suite is there are settings actually in Teams and Outlook for you to silence notifications for non-working periods. They should be there out of the box. So if you've enabled this, this is really a user education piece quite often, telling them how to configure it. So you can set it so that on weekends, for example, Teams and Outlook will not hit you with notifications. So that's one technical measure that you can definitely add in, and I'd recommend you have a quick look at that. But Matt, anything you'd add on that one?
Well, I think I absolutely agree with that. I think the technical measures are absolutely there. They're not deployed enough at the moment. I think that education is really important. But I think simply don't assume that people think the same way as you do. And I think, I'll take that from both. I have some IT directors, CIOs I speak to that absolutely in the camp of BYOD. They're like, oh, well, I believe in BYOD, we should all be BYOD. I have others who are like, no, I 100% want separation between the two. I think the reality is, as we looked at our heat map, you actually have a whole range of different groups of users within your organization. And I think the key is to don't second guess, come up with a small portfolio that addresses both BYOD and corporate, understand when it's good to provide either, and give people the choice and educate them on that. And what you will find is some people want to do complete separation, and you can understand that. They might be in a high pressure job and they just feel that, hey, I don't even have the discipline to not look. Others are absolutely going to want to give up their corporate phone because they don't really use it or they don't see a problem with it. So I would say don't get too hung up on your personal views, because you've got a lot of different users out there. They've all got different opinions, but use surveys to engage with them. Don't lead them to a conclusion. Just share with them and see what results is, and you might be pleasantly surprised by what you get back. Conversely, there are occasions where we have seen that separation has come back very loud and clear, in especially in high pressure jobs and legal and places like that. They feel that separation is something that is actually needed, but in many cases, in a lot of industry, it fits part of a solution, and people really like it. Excellent.
Thank you, Matt. Well, if you want to move the presentation on. So the final question we did have in the background was, how much does it cost? So I think the answer is get in touch. I will tell you, but the answer is it's going to be a bit of a no-brainer compared to the savings that potentially you can lock in long term as a result. And that's really where we'll finish for today. If you actually do want to start thinking about how to manage costs on an ongoing basis, and actually long-term lock-in of savings, then, as Matt mentioned during the presentation, we've got a fantastic offer here in terms of a no-win, no-fee type model, where you really can start to, outsource the problem to us, and we'll help you with this. So if you are interested, I know there'll be follow-up to this webinar in terms of recordings and also the product sheet relating to this. So we will be in contact with you, I'm sure. But if you do have any further questions, just get in touch with your account manager. They'll be more than happy to broker a conversation, I'm sure, with Matt on your behalf. So I think at that point, thank you very much for taking time to join us today. And yes, we look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, thank you all.
Cheers all.